Before we leave Songshan, there are a couple of other stories, issues that must be discussed. But it needs to be said overall that it was a very poignant, a very good experience for me. It's things that happened there are very, very clear to me, including the things I'm about to tell you. Flash forward years later, probably 15, maybe even 20 years later, Gary Jones and I are in Taipei. We're in Taiwan. He's on business. I'm doing research for some article. Back then, keep in mind, telephones were still connected to the walls, and computers were something at home on your desk. So we connected there, and it was great, and we did a couple of incredible things that are all flash forwards. But we got in a cab and tried to find the apartment, tried to find the street on which the apartment I'm now talking about was built. And we could not. I think I even had the exact address, but the taxi driver could not find it. It would not at all surprise me if in the intervening years that whole neighborhood had been simply leveled, and bigger streets put in. In fact, I'd be surprised if that's not what happened. Couldn't find the apartment, so that was a bittersweet moment there with Gary Jones. And then he and I ran off to Kaohsiung to go visit Su Baba. Have we spoken of Su Baba? We'll have to see. I'll have to do some review here. Back to the mission. That wonderful apartment, now gone, long gone. Steve Toronto. I finally lost my temper with him. He was close to going home. He was revered. He was as hardworking as ever, if not more. And Art Barrett, and I will share a wonderful story or two about Art Barrett before we stop. Art Barrett tolerated Steve very much. I was not that tolerant. So here it is. We went out on splits one day. Steve Toronto and I went out from the apartment while Paul Dupre went out with Art, as was common, of course. Steve Toronto, that is, ran up the stairways and down the stairways from door to door, from apartment wing to apartment wing. He ran. He was famous for this. It didn't matter how hot, nothing mattered. He was famous for running. And so I'm quite sure this was the first time I actually went tracting with Steve Toronto, and he is running, and it's very hot and very wet. And I've been on island more than a year now. Let's not press things. I am going to make it, as long as it doesn't get too crazy out here. No, Steve is running, and I'm kind of walking up the steps behind him, not making too much noise, because here we are in that whole authority thing, yeah? Here we are where we don't want Elder Meacham to raise his voice to Elder Toronto, because Elder Toronto is so very much senior to Elder Meacham. in so many ways, as he remains to this day. But I lost my temper because he finally ran up probably a flight or two or three flights when we were stupidly sweating out, ridiculous. My crud was bothering me, and no one was behind the door. When we got through a door, he would then SST. It was just too much for me. It was too much for me. And I called him on it. I think I said, I want to go to the roof and talk to you for a minute. Because remember, you could walk up to the fourth floor there and go out onto the roof. I would say to get some fresh air, but there was no fresh air up there. I think we went up onto the roof, or it was between floors, and I said, do you have to run? Yo, Elder Toronto, Tu Zhang Lao, Tu Zhang Lao. Do you have to run? What's the big deal? Do you think we're going to run out of doors to knock on? Why are you rubbing your ultra devoted passion in our faces like this? And so there I am, Paul Dupre, speaking up to my senior, as it were. And he looked at me. I remember him looking at me with something between scorn and a smile as he paused. And he said, because, Elder Meacham, I love the Lord. And he then ran up the next flight, and I'm quite sure I ran up after him, because his very well taken point was, what are we doing here? Is this the spiritual athletic event of our lives or not? I'm sorry that this is how I manifest it, but for today, I'm in charge, and you're going to run up the steps. In the heels of my little episode with Paul Dupre and the condensed milk or the baking powder, whatever it was, I had nothing to say. Nothing to say. That was a pretty darn good answer. Fine, Steve. Okay, so, that kind of powerful logic would go on to serve you well in the future. Fine. Art Barrett, his companion, who I think told me back then he was planning to become a chiropractor. In fact, back then, I'm pretty sure he had to explain to me what is a chiropractor, and he explained to me. And I think he'd already been through maybe a year or two of chiropractic school, because you could do that straight out of high school. And he explained to me furthermore, when I asked him, why are you into this? He very quickly explained, it's a secure future. I think his dad or his brothers had done this. And he said, it's a secure future. It's not medicine, so you don't need, there's nothing invasive. You need a simple setup with a receptionist or a secretary, and you visit people for a few minutes, and he said, and to this day I agree, the health benefits, or the whatever benefits to the patients, they'll come back, they'll pay, they'll come back. It's secure, there's plenty of people, I can take over my brother's practice, whatever. And that attitude, his pragmatism, appealed to me very much. Something about that, he was the Ian to my young. I was going to become something obscenely creative, and I was going to take professional risks that no set of parents were ever going to allow or tolerate, certainly not pay for. Art Barrett was already halfway to a secure future that would begin a couple of years after he got home, when he got, as he planned to, get married, have kids, and move on with his life. And I hope that's what he did. I hope, to this day, I hope he retired or opened several clinics and had children and grandchildren and became a chiropractor. Because don't you love it when a plan comes together? I do. And so I respected that very much. There was a part of me that sensed back then, Corey, there it is. Practical, creative has its place, but let's not get carried away. Final memory of that wonderful, long-gone apartment was that while I was there, it was, I'd been on island a year, so it was the summer again, very much so. In fact, there was a typhoon there. I think my only real typhoon while I was on island, and that was incredible. No, there were two. That was incredible. Blew the windows out, water on the floor. Elder Dupre was very impressed, and I loved it. Just loved that heavy display of natural power. And, I didn't have to go tracting during the typhoon. I don't think I had to watch Elder Toronto and Elder Barrett bicycle home during the typhoon, did I? Paul and I were sequestered, hiding up there with some of the windows open because you didn't want them all to blow out at once. Hot, wet. At some point during those 3 months, the cockroaches were out of freaking control. Out of control. We agreed one night that this was the photo opportunity that every missionary in the tropics was waiting for to send home to our parents. Keeping in mind, back in the day, you had to take a picture. You had to have it developed. You had to send it in the mail, send it home. No cell phones, none of that. And so one night, the four of us agreed in group disgust, Toronto included, bless his heart. We killed and gathered 3 or 4 dozen large cockroaches. And we put them in the middle of the kitchen table, still twitching. And each of us took turns putting our hands in front of that mass and leaning forward to have what back then essentially was a selfie. To have a selfie taken with the night's trophies, the night's cull, the night's harvest of our little friends in that wonderful apartment back in Songshan.
I dig rock and roll music and I love to get the chance to play and sing it. I figure it's about the happiest sound going down today. The message may not move me or mean a and the poppers at the Trip Sunset Strip in L.A. And they got a good thing going when the words don't get in the way. And when they're really wailing, Michelle and Cass are sailing. Hey, they really nail me to the wall. Yeah. Donovan, Kendall, the dreamland trip that way. His crystal images, he tell you about the brighter day. And when the Beatles tell you, they've got a word love to sell you, and they mean exactly what they say. I dig rock and roll music. I could really get it on in that scene. I think I could say something